I've done it. I have done it. I've only gone and done it. I have finally beaten Lies of P. Yay, go me, go me. So, reason I'm so excited is because this is my first completed Souls-like game. Can you believe it? I played Elden Rings and that in the time, but between you and me, I never actually completed it because I found it too hard. But I've done this one. I've done it. Yes. So I've finished it and I can finally review Lies of P, which has been an absolute journey. So yeah, like I said, I'm going to review Lies of P today. I'm going to go into some of the good, some of the bad. I'm going to drop some tips as well for those who haven't played it. There'll only be very minor spoilers. Minor spoilers here, so there won't be any major story spoilers. So you're safe to watch and listen and consume at your pleasure. So yeah, let's get into it. I'm so happy about this one. So I've got some gameplay that I can share with you here as well. I'm just going to skip forward a bit. There, that would do. Got some gameplay on the screen in the background so I can talk alongside it too. And essentially what we have got is, so a bit of summary. Lies of P, what you can see on the screen here now. Lies of P is a Souls-like game. And for those who don't know what Souls-like is basically a very, very hard, a very hard style game. It's very, very difficult, let's put it that way. It's an action RPG. It was released in September this year, developed by someone called NeoWiz, I believe, and Round 8. And what's so cool about this game is, so it's loosely based on, loosely based on Pinocchio. So you see the character I'm playing as here, fighting this down robot that's kicking my ass. That's essentially Pinocchio. And it's based on the 1883, I think it is, the novel version. And it's really cool. So essentially you are Pinocchio, you're making your way through a world, and the world has been overrun by puppets and different robots that you can see here, which is it's really cool, really, really cool story. And it's a really cool take on the classic Pinocchio. It's something different. I was like, when I first seen it, I was like, Pinocchio in Souls-like. I was like, what? But I love that dark aspect of it. It's really, really cool. It's got loads of different weapon combos, loads of different things you can do, and I'll go into this a bit more in the good and stuff. But there's actually a lot more to this game than I originally thought there would be. And I think I put about, I think it was about 50 hours in the end, only because I spent probably about 10 hours out on the last bosses. But yeah, we'll get into that anyway. Let's not dwell on that too much. But yeah, just from the like I said, this is interesting IP to go towards, like Pinocchio. And basically, when I read about it and the developers and stuff, they said they chose Pinocchio and stuff for this IP to try and get people who have never been into fantasy heavy Souls-like games like an Elden Ring and stuff and try and get people into that genre who've never been in that genre before, which I thought was really cool of them. It was really interesting that they took this route and they thought about their gamers as a consumer. They didn't just make another literally a carbon copy of Souls-like game. I mean, there is a lot of aspects. If you've played Souls-like before, you can see on the screen here, there is a lot that's very similar. But let's go into what's good, shall we? What's really good about this game is, yes, and you may have heard this before, a lot of people say it's easier than a Dark Souls game. It is, but don't go in expecting Mario Wonder. Don't go in and expect to just walk through it basically in 20 hours, because I did a bit. I heard that it was a bit easier And I was kind of expecting to get through this in about 25, 30 hours, but I was wrong. It is easier, yes, but it's easier in a way where it's more progressively easier. So the skill checkpoints of where the game says you need to be at this kind of level, player level, and you need to be at this kind of like experience with the game and capability with this game, is very well done. So essentially, like each boss fight, and it's like this in all Souls like games, but for some reason this one does it really, really well, where it eases you in and it doesn't just throw you straight into the deep end. And I think that's a bit to do with the linear format as well. But we'll go into like the linear format. So like the linear format, so this is, I'm gonna talk about the linear side of it in a negative as well, and you'll see why in a sec. But for a positive, essentially, I put this as a positive because it's so refreshing. It is so refreshing to play a linear-based game in the past like 2-3 years, which has just been, oh, I'm going to do an open world RPG. Oh, let's do an open world RPG. And it's like, oh, come on, man. Like, I want to be told where I need to go. Sometimes I don't want to use my brain. Sometimes I just want to go forward, fight, move on to the next stage. And that was really refreshing to kind of go back to that kind of route-based linear game. As you can see here on the video, I'm getting absolutely battered. Another good positive of it, and I'll just talk through some of the stuff that's going on the screen. There's so many cool mechanics in this game. There's so many like little niche parts. So on the left hand side you can see he's got his, where it says LT and that weird name, I can't pronounce that. It's like it's called his Legion arm basically, and it's like a secondary weapon, and that like you can upgrade that. You can get like fire abilities, electrical abilities, block abilities, like loads of different abilities that you can use it for, and it's a nice addition. You're not just with a sword and a shield and hope for the best. There's not really magic in it, so to say, but I think that's like your magical power elements. It's got all them like elements and like poison, acid, I think it's called on this. It's got all them aspects like a classic Souls-like game basically. But essentially, like, yeah, the different combinations you can create blew my mind a little bit actually, because I just wasn't expecting it. So you can, I think there's about, let me try to remember this. I think there's about 100 weapons, 30 different weapons and about 100 different combinations. So with your weapons and stuff, don't worry, you learn all this early on. With your weapons and stuff, you can essentially, like, you have the base of the weapon, so like the handle, you can change that with the actual blade of the weapon, and you can mix that up and like adapt it to your play style a bit more. So I know a lot of like Souls-like games, it's like, well, what's the best build? And you have to adapt to that play style, whereas this, you can do the whole game how you want to play. So that's definitely a positive. What other mechanics are there? Oh, there's like, yeah, there's all the standard healing, throwing objects, all that stuff. But on the, it's probably not the best time to explain this while this is in a boss fight, but on the right hand side, you've got the grey bar, and that is your weapon durability for blocking. What's really cool about this though, that arm I spoke about before, is when you're holding block and you hold down X or square or whatever console you're playing on, and you can repair your weapon on the spot. It's not like it's got 100 durability and then once it's gone it explodes kind of thing. You can repair it as you go along, and I thought that was a really cool touch. And like the feel of it just feels real. So it just feels like you are repairing that weapon. They've done some really good like development with the like controller and the noise, the sounds, the music, the actions that Pinocchio does and stuff, and it's really, really cool. As you can see, I've just died there, so it's probably not the best time to describe that. and just touching another good point, just touching back on that like Pinocchio style thing. It actually works. Like the story is really really cool. Like it's like you've got like Geppetto, Jiminy, and all that, and they all play their own roles. I won't go into their roles, so I don't want to spoil it for people. But I was like, is this actually going to work, or is it just going to be a bit cringe? But no, it's done so well. The story is done so well. So if you are someone who's like quite focused on story, lore, reading about stuff as well with collectibles, then I think you'll really like this because it's got a really cool story behind it. There's loads of different aspects to it about the puppets and what's happened before in this city of Krot. This is where it's based. And yeah, it's just a really cool story. So I recommend, if you love the story, you should definitely check it out. Even if you don't play the game, like look up the story, because I think it's really clever how they've done it. And like the final like plus point I'd say is, and can you really see it in these scenes that are on the screen now? Probably not so much, but the game looks incredible when you're playing. It runs smoothly. The pictures, the scenes, the weather, the darkness of it, it really does a good job of like enclosing you in that world and making you feel part of it. And I think it does that with the visuals, and it's really really cool because like you can see all these tanks and the walls and the detail. It's a really really good looking game, and which is quite a nice thing to have in this style of game. It's not just all about the combat. Well, it is, but you've got really cool environments here. Look, like at this point you're in like a museum, and you can like look at stuff and see different things. And it's just overall, it's just a really really good looking game. Essentially, it looks mint, looks absolutely mint, and I love it. So I'm just going to touch on the things that weren't so great, and then I'll go into my tips, and then I'll cap off with like my score or review, so to say. The one thing I want in this game, and this ain't really a criticism, so I'll start off mild. I'd love a co-op in this game, or some kind of multiplayer. And I mean, other Souls-like games, you have the raid capability or the invasion capability, where you can go into other people's worlds. But actual co-op in some way would be really cool. It'd be really cool to play this. I was speaking to a mate at the same time who was playing this, who was a little bit ahead of me, and he was playing this about the same time, and we were constantly like on the chat like, oh, what did you do at this point? What did you do at this point? And when it gets tough later on, I was like, oh, I wish there was a co-op so I could bring you in and you could give me a hand and all that stuff. So that would be really cool. I mentioned earlier about the linear format. So I did put it down as a positive, but like I said, it can also be a negative. And there's two reasons for that. There's little things in this game that are annoying, and I'm not just talking about it being difficult, because obviously that is an annoyance, but there's areas in the game where it's too linear that you can barely swing your weapon. So as you can see in my build here, I mean this part's fine, but I've got a big weapon that I'm like swinging around. But there's parts of the games where it's so narrow that you just hit walls, and then you end up just getting smacked by a puppet and just getting absolutely battered. And it's little things like that like ground my gears a bit, like especially after like so many hours, and it kept happening even later in the game. And then also another thing about the linear format of it is, if you get stuck, this is especially so in the later game, but if you get stuck and you're struggling to beat a boss, yes, you can run back through and like grind ergo, which is like the power level, the souls to level up, but it's not easy. So because if with the open world stuff, you've got a lot of different avenues. It's like, okay, I can't beat this boss now, but if I go here, or here, I can do things. But here you're like, okay, if I can't beat this boss now, I'll have to go back on the chapter I was on before oh, I'm not getting as much XP. Like, it just feels a bit like long-winded and tedious. And with the like traversing of the like the fast travel and stuff isn't that great, and it can take a few minutes to get a like to get to where you want to be. Like, and that's especially so in like with upgrading your weapon. And so the hotel's like the base of this game, and even there at the hotel you have to kind of trek around a bit to collect the things you want to use or need for, say, a boss fight or a certain chapter, or and this going back and forth. And yeah, I know you do that in like with shops and stuff in other games and vendors and all that stuff, but here, because it is so linear, you kind of, it needs to be quicker, and you need to be able to do more at checkpoints. So you can do quite a fair bit at checkpoints, but the stuff you actually need, you can't really do. And it just after like 20 or so hours, it can get a bit tedious. But if you don't see, just there, I just hit the wall then when I was swinging. I don't know if you've seen it. You probably just missed it because I nearly did. But like, I was swinging for that guy then, and I hit the wall, and it's just like, what? Like, I can't help it. Like, my weapon's so big. Like, look, going through that door, it's like massive. And yeah, as I mentioned, yeah, going back and forth to upgrade, get the items you want for a boss fight, etc. And then, like, one final point I'll touch on the not so good is some of the areas like don't seem well fitted to the like the baddies, the enemies on it, the baddies. And essentially, there's like certain things where you have to like climb across these beams, and you've got the risk of falling off. And there's like multiple enemies like these guys with the guns and like throwing things at you, and it's just like there's certain points in the game where the fit of what type of enemy it is doesn't fit that area that well, and it doesn't really match. And if that swapped around a little bit and it had different style enemies, then you'd be like, oh yeah, I can see why this kind of enemy's at this point. And especially with like camera work, so you can see that a bit here, like when he jumps up in the air, it doesn't show you that much, and that comes quite apparent like really later on as well. The camera work isn't 100% great. I mean, it's not bad, but it's not great either. Especially if you guys have seen like recently, like Lords of the Fallen, and all the stuff about the camera work on that. I've seen a few videos about that. It's not as good as that, and you'll have to be patient with that. So yeah, that's good. It's the bad. Before I give my overall summary, there was a few tips that I really want to share with people, because I'd like to thank a friend who mentioned this first one to me, and it actually saved me quite a bit. So thanks, mate. I really appreciate it. You know who you are. So there's stuff called Ergo in this game, and that's the stuff you basically collect to level up. Now, when you do a boss fight, you'll get like a lot, and you'll get like the boss's main Ergo. So don't spend this early on in the game. So all I'm going to say, just don't spend it. Trust me, just keep it, and you'll see why, and you'll thank me later. So that was the first tip. The second tip is, don't focus too much on the weapons and stuff you start with. So as I said, there's a lot of weapons. There's like 30 weapons, 30 odd weapons in total or something. There's 100 combinations. Don't worry too much about upgrading them, because you'll naturally you should a little bit, but you'll naturally find better weapons. I'd personally focus on upgrading your character's level, your strength, your stamina, especially, and your attack power, your defense, etc. Stuff like that. So I'd focus on that. Tip number 3 is try to keep consumables. I can't speak today. I've got a blocked nose, so it's not helping. Try to keep consumables stacked up. So for little fights, etc. So I'll just explain. I'll just stop there and explain what's going on here at the screen. But this is like your character screen. So you've got defensive parts, amulets, which give you different perks. You've got all the cool different stuff, your belts, your upper belt, lower belt that you can like throw, etc. It's really cool. There's a lot of different things in the game. Excuse me. Yeah, but like I was saying, all these consumables that you can see here, try and stack these up as much as possible. Try not to use them early on, and especially try not to use them when you're not in a boss fight, because you will need stuff like this later on as it gets harder, and certain boss fighters have certain elements and certain things will help. And trust me, just try and stack up as much consumables as you can. And you can store as many. I didn't come across a limit, so you can store as many as you want. The next point, make sure you talk to everyone. This might be a given, but in Souls-like games, I think I've first seen this in Elden Ring, but you have to talk to someone twice as well. But even if you don't like talking to everyone and you skip through it, just make sure you talk to everyone, because there's certain things that you could potentially get, and it will be really helpful. It's got some really cool unlockables, cool collectibles, cool achievements, etc. So yeah, definitely make sure you give a chat to your old NPCs that are knocking about. Keep your eye on for shortcuts. So as you can see here on the screen, if you're watching, there's laddered shortcuts throughout the game. And keep your eye out for these, because they come in handy. So as you can see now, I'm heading back to the save point to be able to recharge my health and my life up and all that stuff. So keep that in mind, and keep that, like, stay vigilant basically around your surroundings, because these like laddered shortcuts and gates and stuff like that, because otherwise now I'd have to go back left and go through all that bit I'd just done. But now I can just go straight up this ladder, which I'm heading towards now. I'm just running past these guys and just going straight up, and I'm back to where I was. So they're really handy. Keep an eye on them, because they can be quite easy to miss, some of them, because sometimes there's a choice of going left or right, etc. So just make sure you do that. And the last one I'd say is, and this might be a bit of a given, but learn to block. Learn to parry attacks. When I found when I was playing like Elden Ring and stuff, is you can get away through a lot of the game by like dodge roll and dodging. Yes, you can dodge and stuff in this game, and you will need it, but this game has a high focus on the block and parry, and you might see a bit here on this boss fight. I don't know if you will, might be finished by then, but you have something called like stagger. So if you hit a perfect block, it like doesn't take health off basically, and there's this really cool thing called guard regain, where when you block, if you don't perfect block and you block and you get hit, you lose a bit of health, but you can gain that back by hitting the enemy back. And I think that's really cool. So there's a big focus on block. So early on, take your time. If you're not a blocker in these kind of games, like, learn to perfect that blocking of the attacks, because honestly it will come in so handy later on, especially on boss fights like this. Potentially you get away with a bit more because he's a big unit, you can kind of dodge him. But it helps a lot. Just trust me, just really get into it. You'll learn about it very early on, and it will like kind of like step-by-step tutorial it for you as well. But just learn to perfect it before you go any further in the game is what I'm trying to say. So them are like tips. Hope some of them are useful. I think the main one is the boss fight. Don't spend that, save that. But I'm going to jump into my overall verdict now while we watch me get absolutely trounced by this boss. Overall, then, I give this game a 8 out of 10. So I'll give this an 8 out of 10. I had a great time. Like, I personally I was ready for it to finish. I feel like the game is a little bit too long. Some of them negative things that I went through earlier on, some of the annoyances kind of knock it down a little bit. And they do grind on you after a while because the game is so long. And the game didn't need to be that long. And there's certain mechanics and certain parts of the game where you're just like, come on, this doesn't feel great. But then there's other parts, and 90% of the game is fantastic. And it's, like I said earlier, it's beautifully made. The story's really cool. The concept of the Pinocchio thing's really cool. So yeah, overall, 8 out of 10. Had fun. Had a great time. And it's like the developers trying to do. It's a great game if you're new to the genre. If you've never done like a hardcore Souls like before. Yeah, but unfortunately, some of the negatives are some of the mechanics let it down. But 8 out of 10 is a good score, I think. I think it's pretty sound. I think it's worth a play. I definitely recommend it. Though be prepared to invest yourself in it. So, as you can see from my channel, I've not done a video for a while because I've been so invested in this, and I kind of just like lost myself. So I kind of feel a bit more free now. So I'm back. Feeling good, full of energy for you guys to do some more videos, some more reviews. Hopefully I can finish some more games. But yeah, that's my overview of Lies of P. What do you guys think? Have you played it? Are you still playing it? Are you going to keep playing it? Are you giving up? What don't you like about it? What did you like about it? Like, let me know in the comments, like, what builds did you go for? Like, have you got other tips? Like I said about the I don't know, keeping the consumables and stuff. Like, would you agree? Is there other things you'd disagree on? Let me know in the comments. But essentially, that's it, guys. Thank you very much for listening. If you hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, and hopefully you can see all my other videos and stuff on my channel. I'd really appreciate it. And yeah, let's leave it there. Thanks again, guys. Have a beautiful week. I'll see you all soon. Bye for now.